So once you've mastered the serratus punch, the flagpole, the screwdriver, and you feel like you have a good idea of what's my shoulder doing in space with that weight, now we're going to kind of up the game a little bit, and we're going to go to the first two phases of a Turkish get-up. We're not going to go through the full Turkish get-up. It's a big movement that involves overhead. A lot of shoulder patients, that's too big of a task this early on in your rehab process. So I cut it back just to the first two movements of the pattern to really work on, yes, can you still maintain that stability that you learned in the serratus punch and the flagpole exercise? But now we're going to have this added element of, can I stabilize my shoulder in the socket on the other arm, the arm that's going to be kind of helping to initiate the Turkish get-up, being the holding my body weight. How can I stabilize my body on that arm? This is going to be a great trainer to progress you towards things like planks, which are very popular core exercises that a lot of people try, but really even just simple things like getting out of bed. How do I pressure my shoulder? How do I stabilize my shoulder? How do I position it when I'm doing those kinds of press up kind of tasks that oftentimes hurt the shoulder because the humerus isn't being controlled as we're moving? We're putting too much stress through the shoulder joint, too much shear across the bicep tendon and across the rotator cuff muscles, because we're not controlling how my shoulder blade and my shoulder kind of move on my body and where I put the stress. So the Turkish get-up phase 1-2 is a great way to kind of to check that and strengthen the proper mechanics. So what I'll have you do here is you're laying on your back. You don't have to use weight in the beginning, but again, the same kind of progression of weight that we talked about with the serratus punches and the flagpoles. You start off with heavier weights start off with lighter weights, and you progress to heavier weights if your goals are to get to higher level tasks. If we're just looking for more daily functional lifts and being able to reach out for tickets at the parking garage and things like that, you don't need to use heavy weights to get this concept down and drilled in and reinforced. So what you're going to do is you're going to lay on your back, and you're going to have your arm up, whatever arm you want to work first. You should do both. So pick an arm, right arm, left arm, and bring it up towards the ceiling, and that hand is going to the hand that goes up is going to be the same knee that you bring up. So if you bring up your right hand, you're going to bring up your right knee. Now and just place your foot on the floor just like you're doing a bridge position, lying comfortably. Now you're going to press yourself up towards the ceiling, and this is where it's going to become really important what you do. So as I press myself up towards the ceiling and do basically a sit-up, I want to pay attention to two things. One is, what's my knee position? We just don't want our knee coming across the body. We want to make sure our knee is still pointing up towards the ceiling. Our hip is straight. That's just for general body awareness. But then for the shoulder, and more specific to this exercise, we want to make sure that we have our body weight, that we have the shoulder that's on the ground also thinking about being in central position. A lot of times people will allow their shoulder to kind of deviate forward in the socket as I'm taking that weight into my shoulder, and that deviation forward is going to put a lot of shear towards the front side of that shoulder joint. So having my body rotate and open up and keep that humerus in the center of the socket is going to be absolutely imperative to doing this right and not stressing the front of the shoulder. What I'll oftentimes have my patients do is just feel the difference. Get yourself to that center socket by getting that trunk rotation and initiate that trunk rotation and set that shoulder in place, and then allow yourself to kind of sag down and lower and let your body weight just kind of rest on that joint, and you'll feel that stress in the front of the shoulder. That stress is what you're doing when you press up from the bed. It's easier to kind of let our shoulder kind of drive forward so we can try and use our tricep to press up, but we sacrificed our form of our shoulder position to do that, and essentially weaken the movement and made it harder to get up. So instead, it is the path of least resistance to do that. So that's why we end up getting hurt. So now that we have our focus on it, let's try and make sure we train ourselves to get that position proper, and then press up through the shoulder and have a more a seated shoulder position and shoulder blade, so we get more power out of the movement and less stress, less pain. So then you're going to pop up onto your hand, same cue. Don't let your shoulder deviate forward. Don't let that shoulder drive forward and shear that bicep tendon, that rotator cuff. But can I get that guy seated back in the shoulder and press towards the ceiling, and then hold, come back down, back to the elbow, back down to the ground. Really complicated, really hard for people to work through, kind of feeling this position. Once you get it, it becomes a lot easier. But in the beginning, as you're trying to learn it, you're going to find that it's very easy to get into the wrong position. It's very easy to allow your shoulder to kind of deviate back. It's just it's lazy is a strong word, but it's basically your body's way of trying to find the easiest path to that movement, and you have to kind of outsmart that a little bit and find, yes, the more muscularly challenging route, but then the better route for your joint and the better route for your ligaments and tendons as well. I'll have people normally repeat this 5 times on each side as they're kind of getting acclimated to the movement. As you increase the weights, that 5 times is still going to be plenty challenging, but you're just going back and forth and then doing 5 on each side.